I was hesitant to bring this one to the channel. Many people know and love this song. I have heard it before and I love it so very much. I have never fully dealt with the history of it, taking it apart philosophically, psychologically. And as I'm reading up on it, I'm thinking this song is as relevant as ever. It's perfect for you. Ah, she's like singing out of my soul. Sometimes we get lost in our own little world, but it's all so much bigger than we realize. What's in your head? In your head, zombie, zombie, zombie. Oh, that song is amazing. The Cranberries, Zombie. I love this song, but I never really went into what the song is about. And I want to come at it from a psychological aspect today and talk about why this song is as relevant as ever. The song Zombie is not really about zombies, as you probably have gathered. It is talking about the Warrington bombings, where there were 2 bomb attacks that took place in Warrington, I hope I'm saying it right, Cheshire, England. And the first attack happened on February 26th, and back in 93. And there was an explosion, or bomb exploded at a gas storage facility. Nobody was hurt at the time. But then there was a second bombing on March 20th. So less than a month later, the second attack happened. 2 smaller bombs exploded in litter bins outside of shops, and it killed 2 children and 56 people were injured. Those attacks were carried out by the Provisional IRA, the Irish Republican Army. They, since the early 1970s, had been carrying out attacks in northern England and in England with that stated goal to put pressure on the UK to get out of Northern Ireland. And they have been deemed a terrorist organization in the United Kingdom. And before we listen to the song together, my first thought when reading this was, isn't it crazy how we justify so many different things to ourselves? The people part of these events may or may not have told themselves that whatever happens, whoever gets hurt, whatever gets damaged, is worth it if it means the UK gets out of Ireland. It's crazy how when we want to fight for freedom, when we want to fight for whatever cause we put ourselves behind, as human beings, we go to incredible measures, sometimes willing to kill or be killed. And that is not a mindset that just belongs to one or the other people group. We sometimes forget that every human being, if we expose ourselves long enough to a certain type of indoctrination, if we tell ourselves something long enough, the narrative we tell ourselves in our everyday life, from small little details to the big fanatical, radical theories, we are all capable of telling ourselves something to the point that we believe it. And that was my first thought, just as a little way to set the stage here. I thought to myself, isn't it crazy? People justifying to themselves killing innocent people or risking lives, even if they didn't intend to kill children, even just making that risk, taking the risk of causing an explosion that could possibly kill someone, maybe intentionally wanting to kill people, to get attention, to build awareness, possibly telling themselves it was all to fight for independence or to get the UK to get out. And that's according to this resource that claims that was the purpose of the IRA. And then to think children died. Innocent lives were lost because adults told themselves a certain type of story, believed something, and pursued it at the cost of death. And that's so crazy because we forget so easily how fragile life is. So in light of that little history lesson, let's listen to this. This song was written by, it's a protest song. The band, the Cranberries, is an Irish alternative rock band called the Cranberries. And it was written by their lead singer, Dolores O'Riordan. And it is about the young victims of the Warrington bombing. I always thought it was just about war in general, just generally against war. I love that guitar introduction. It's coming in softly with that metal. Now the drums, bringing in the intensity. The tambourine is a powerful touch. It's heavy, man. I feel like this metal, even if it's, soft metal, is just a perfect genre for this. I love how music is so universal and we can communicate so much beyond lyrics and voices through what instruments can do when they come together. And you could have the same instruments coming together, making completely different sounds. You got your guitar, keyboard, drums, and you can make anything from blues and country and jazz to, and now, add other instruments to now you have metal. And I love how different genres convey different messages and how it affects us differently, how it does different things with the neurons in our brain and the synapses and with our emotional response. I love that. That's why when people ask me what's my favorite music, there's no way I'm going to pick. I'm a creative person. I won't be boxed in, but also there's no way because all of it is just beautiful. And when it comes to this song and this message, I feel like metal and it being soft metal is so perfect, so fitting for this message. It's very fitting to convey this. Dolores' voice is amazing. The way that she yodels, her vocal range, her vocal control, the way that she cries with her voice. And that timeless, historic yodeling is so fitting to that wailing. It made me think of a mother wailing. When somebody comes to tell you that your child has died the pain that I don't want to. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who was just informed that they lost someone? That cry, that complete, utter brokenness. It hurts. Like, people are hurting. And that's why I'm weeping right now, because it keeps happening. And that's why I say this song is as relevant as ever, because it makes me think of what's happening in our world. And let me be really straight with you guys. I try to be sweet in this channel. I try to come at it from a therapeutic standpoint, psychological standpoint. But I'm a mom. And there's a side of me that y'all hadn't seen yet. But let me be very clear. If I start talking about this a little bit deeper from a psychological standpoint, or I bring it into context in our current day and age, don't y'all dare come at me in the comment section about, oh, there's an agenda. I knew it. I'ma go Cuban mama on your booty. Like, don't, If I'm talking about what's happening in our world, I am not coming at it from an agenda, a political side. I am saying, what are we doing to each other? Okay, so don't come at me with, oh, you have an agenda. If I start bringing in Palestine and Israel, or what's happening in Africa and Iran and what's being done to children around the world, do not come at me with, oh, she has an agenda. Get the chocolate fudge out of here. I'm going to keep it PG. Okay, we have got to wake up when the violence causes silence. When there's death and our children are dying, we have got to stop and think. And yet we always find a way to justify ourselves. I've been guilty of it, of taking a side and going, well, because life's complicated. War is complicated. There is a time to fight. If someone came to attack my house, I would want to protect my family. And we can play hypotheticals all day, right? Well, what would you do if this person coming to attack your house had kids with them, right? People are complicated. War is complicated. And if someone came to attack my kids, I would not pick someone else's kids over my kids, right? Of course. So there's a whole lot of tricky topics when we're talking about hypothetical situations where you're in a predicament where you are trying to survive or trying to take care of your family. And we human beings are tribal. We are just biologically have just evolved into these creatures that very much like animals, in my opinion. I just think people are different types of animals. You got the dolphins among us and the eagles, and you got the bears among us, and you got the predators and the prey. I don't know. I just see people's behavior sometimes, and I'm like, man, I know there are difficult situations because people are complicated, and it's not all black and white. But I want to save all the kids. I want to save all the babies. And I say kids first and foremost because we chose to put them here. And yeah, we could argue, well, we weren't, we didn't choose to put ourselves here. Our parents did. But we're adults now. And there comes a point where we can't keep going and blaming our mom and dad for everything, where we can say, I know better now. I got to do better. I'm an adult now. My kids are not adults yet, though. And we put them here. They didn't choose to be here. And yet we are allowing them to be led to the slaughter. And that's what breaks my heart. And I say this is relevant as ever because it's happening right now. Not just in the whole Israel-Palestine situation. Kids dying, kids dying on both sides. There too, people are so quick to think they have to take a side. A terrorist organization attacking one nation is not okay. Us using history and looking at that through a very biased lens, by the way, to justify things is not okay. It should never be okay to justify a terrorist organization and say, well, they just did this and that because back in that year of this and that, this other group actually did this and that, and they mama's uncle actually. When we study history just a little bit, just take politics out for a second. Stop looking at the media. Just research history a little bit. Just educate yourself a little bit on how people migrated and moved. Just look up history with Sai YouTube's on YouTube, videos on YouTube, just for a little bit. And let's research history. Since we're talking Middle East for just now, I'm going to move on to the rest of the world in a second. Let's look at the history of the Levant and the conquerings and the resettlings and all of that of Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, all these different places where people mixed and married, where people conquered, took people out of their land, resettled them somewhere else. When you see how the whole Levant, what is nowadays Palestine and Israel, when you look at how history has morphed and changed, that whole region, Canaan, all of that area, My conclusion is simply we're all cousins. There is no way to possibly clearly, perfectly trace back one people group. And that's just one example of the world. We see that all over, right? We see that with Latino culture. We see that with Europe, right? Germania. We see that even nowadays, people immigrating. You have people coming to, say, Germany, where I was born and raised. People that have been there now for 2, 3, 4 generations. At what point can these people say they're German, even though they might not look like your typical German, and they also speak Turkish as their second language? But they're so fluent in German, they probably have better grammar than many people out there. They've lived there all their lives. They're raising their kids in this country. They speak the language perfectly. They're paying their taxes. And yet sometimes still by some, they will be looked at as the Ausländer, the foreigner, right? Even nowadays, you have people moving around, struggling to either be accepted or to accept. Look at Africa, right? The media, again, will focus on one narrative, and we forget that a lot of that crap is happening in other places. What's being done to girls and in Iran, what's being done in Africa, people hurting, there being war in all the different places in the world. And the ones who suffer the most are the children, people that are fighting the old man's war. And that's why it breaks my heart. So again, I'm not making this a political agenda. I am not taking sides, pro this side or pro that side. I'm saying we have got to start thinking when the violence causes silence. But I find it so interesting, or grievous actually, that we often just justify that narrative, right? Like I said in the beginning, I wonder if this group that did these bombings, that killed these children, which is what this song is based on, told themselves what they were doing was justifiable because they were trying to fight for freedom. And the price of freedom is that. And then there are things we do where we fight for certain causes and we don't know the ramifications. We don't fully count the cost. We don't know the second or third degree consequences that will come from these actions. And we think we're justified in it. And it's so sad, and it grieves me. And seeing this in context with now knowing more of the history, it breaks me, especially because this is not an isolated event. These were 2 children, years and years, by the way, hence her reference to 1916 and the bombings, however, happening in 93. Years and years of rebellion and of warfare and fighting and people suffering to the point of death. And that's what's so crazy is we forget how precious life is. And this is where the psychological aspect comes in. We take life for granted so often. And I wonder if sometimes that's because we're trying to defy death. Some of us deal with it. We think about it. We have existential fears. We try to find meaning in religion and a life after death and how we make meaning of our life while we're here. But some of us, I wonder if we are dealing with our death anxieties by not dealing, by trying to defy death. Let me do crazy things, adrenaline-driven things. Let me find a cause that I'm willing to die for. And is that worth it? Let me find something I'm willing to fight for, or I'm willing to take another life for. We forget how fragile and precious life is, what it took to even be here. What do they say? Science says 1 in a 4 trillion or 14 trillion chance it would be here. The miracle that we're here to begin with. A miracle that we're making it as far as we are making it, right? So many things can happen along the way. Many people who haven't lived as long as we have, and yet we're still here. But we drive down the highway like we have 7 lives. We make choices as if afterlife is a given and a guaranteed. We fight in the name of politics, religion, power, whatever, you name it, because we think that's what is going to give our life meaning. If we have something to die for. And psychologically, perhaps it gives our meaning life if there's something we're willing to die for. But wouldn't it be nice if life was what we were willing to die for? If being alive was so precious to us that it's worth dying in the end? Because life is so beautiful. And yet, I think we missed the mark. We're getting it wrong. We're mistaking, as she sings, when that violence is causing that silence. And we're completely missing the point with the things we chose to make our lives about, the things we chose to be willing to die for, instead of choosing to live for something instead. It's a hard song to listen to. It's a hard and heavy song, and I've never listened to it through that lens. I always thought it was just generally about war. Seeing her there as this golden, beautiful statue. I don't know if this was a nod to some type of goddess or queen, but that pharaoh-like looking goddess statue, the children at her feet, the crown of thorns on their head was also interesting nod, perhaps to religion, to Jesus. But then again, them also with the arrows, which almost made me think of that angel Cupid, and maybe that contrast between screaming and dying and the crown of thorns and yet shooting an arrow, which could be looked at as a weapon, right? Shooting an arrow, trying to kill, but also Cupid being this angel that shoots arrow to create love. So maybe here that dichotomy and that struggle. Seeing these kids play with their plastic swords, which too, to me, also says we learn those things from our parents and from the former generations. Kids are doing this playfully, probably having learned this behavior from parents, or maybe it's innate somehow in us to want to fight and want to conquer and want to get that pushback from an opponent. But it's sad how there's that contrast between actual soldiers actually killing, kids playing, fighting, and it now turning into kids turning on each other, bullying, hurting one another. It's going from play to actual harm to now death and a child laying there lifelessly and a mother weeping. That pain, it's not worth it. If you are a parent and you know that love for your child, you don't ever want to be in that position where your head hangs low because your child is slowly taken. Because there is silence now, where there was supposed to be children playing and laughter. What's in your head, right? What are we thinking? To me, that says, what are we thinking? What's in your head? But then also to sing about the zombies, which is the walking dead, right? These dead that are all around us, walking among us, that should be a reminder we are destroying each other. What's in your head? What are you thinking about? Another mother is breaking. Her heart is taking over. We must be mistaking. What a powerful song. This song is so timeless. It's the same old theme, and she sings 1916, great rhyme, but obviously this theme is not as old as 1916. It goes far beyond. But here, because it's the reference to the rebellion and the IRA and those fightings in Ireland, the tanks and their bombs and their guns in your head, they are dying. And then even the lyric that said, it's not your family, it's not my family. That is a powerful line too. You see, it's not me, it's not my family. Another way we could take that is in your head they're fighting, as in it's not really in front of us, right? We know of these things, we hear about it, but it's all happening in our head. That's another way that I could take that. But to say, you see, it's not my family, I think that too is something we're guilty of, where we cry about things, we grieve, but then we go back to our day-to-day life because it's not my family that's under attack. I'm not the one fighting for survival. I'm not the one burying my child. And yet out there, it still is going on. And it's not just happening in our head. It's not just zombies, The Walking Dead, something fictional, something that's not really real. It's actually happening. Mothers right now burying their children. Again, I'm not making this about one political place. It's not just in Palestine, but they are dying in Palestine. It's not just in Israel, but they are dying in Israel. It's not just in Iran or in various countries in Africa. It's all around the world where people are fighting and hurting. And it could be small scale, like people being so bullied to the point of complete dismay that they kill themselves, to children out there hurting one another because they've learned it from their parents, to children being beaten by their own parents and aunts and uncles, or sexually abused or hurt. That is horrible and just as bad. Kids dying because of neglect. This is happening all around the world. It's not just one country. And that's why I get so passionate about not making it about agenda, not going, oh, you just this and you're just pushing for that. I'm talking about we got to stop, all of us, everywhere. And now is me saying this on here going to change that? No. But I think it's important that we talk about it. I think it's important that we remember that we listen to songs like this and go, wait a minute. It's heavy. It's heavy. Let me know what you think about this one and how it makes you feel and what you think we can do. I know we can't save all the children. I know we can't save the world in a day. But what can we do to bring change? I think the Cranberries did it here in their own way by bringing awareness and singing about it and creating art about it that to this day reminds us of that same message. And there's a lot of music like it that does the same, but we got to do more. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you on the next ride.